Okay, then let's start. Okay, I think we can wait 1 more minute that everyone is able to join. Okay, I think the rest can join during the introduction. Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here to the session Building a Strong Quantum Industry at the Photonics Days Berlin-Brandenburg. My name is Jörn. I'm CEO at QBN. And first of all, I would like to thank Frank Lersch from Optech BB for the great organization of these super exciting Photonics Days and for giving me the opportunity to chair the session with 4 fantastic speakers and real quantum experts, and of course a very important topic. So quantum technologies will transform entire industries in the years ahead, and they will provide a huge societal and global impact. But there is still a lot to do to turn fundamental research into real-world applications and to transform the European quantum community with its brilliant researchers and extensive public funding and so on to a strong quantum industry with standards, trade fairs, and one voice, of course, like Photonics already has. So QBN, the European Quantum Business Network, a member-driven innovation network founded last year, puts its global network, deep market insights, and experiences for the good of quantum technology's future. So we think a network is more than an ecosystem, with after 1 year, more than 30 members worldwide, ranging from large corporates through SMEs, startups, RTOs, universities, and also ministries. We are building a strong quantum industry together. So organizations from all over the world are highly welcome to join our fast-growing network. And if you're interested in networking and business opportunities, as well as knowledge exchange and innovation support, please contact me via email or LinkedIn. So, and enough from my side. Let's dive deeper into some of the most important topics on that way: collaboration, ecosystems, and of course, the state of the art in quantum technologies. So let's gain an overview of the 2 quantum initiatives, one in Scotland and one in Israel, and the flourishing ecosystems, and explore business opportunities with 2 of the most exciting drivers of the commercialization, quantum technology startups. So finally, we will take a look into the crystal ball and discuss how we can accelerate the transformation process. Now, please welcome our speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Loyd McKnight. He is head of quantum technologies at the Photonics Center of Applied Photonics at Fraunhofer, UK. The second speaker will be Dr. Kevin Füchsel. He's CEO at Quantum Optics Jena. And the third speaker will be Dr. Jörn Epping. He's senior project manager at QuiX Quantum from the Netherlands. And last but not least, the fourth speaker is Dr. Tal David. He is head of the Israel National Quantum Initiative. So gentlemen, welcome to the stage. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And now listening and enjoy a 15-minute talks from each of the speakers, followed by a Q&A session. So I'm super curious. Please ask your questions or put your questions in the Q&A box, and I will pass them through to the speakers after their talk. At the end, we will have a short discussion with all speakers, and enjoy the session. And I think we can start with the first talk directly. So Loyd, the first talk is from your side about innovation and commercialization of quantum technologies in Scotland. The virtual stage is yours.
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can hear and see my slides okay?
Looks great.
Great. So my name is Loyd McKnight. Thank you for the invitation to talk and the introduction. Just to confuse you, I'm based at a Fraunhofer Centre, but in Scotland, in the UK. So everybody in this session probably knows what quantum technologies are, but since I'm the first speaker, I thought I would just throw a few things on the slide. So we're now able to manipulate the quantum states of matter, for example, using lasers to cool and trap atoms and ions and manipulate their quantum states. We can control and produce single photons. We can detect single photons. And using superconducting circuits, we can engineer qubit architectures. But alongside quantum technologies, we often talk about the applications and the markets, and often broken down into these application themes. Quantum communication, where we can encode information onto light to prevent eavesdroppers. Quantum computing, which some of the other speakers may talk in more detail about. Quantum sensors, where we can use the states of matter to provide new levels of precision, and quantum enhanced imaging and ranging, where we can use the properties of light to get new levels of sensitivity. So the world has awoken to quantum technologies in the last 10 years. This is one snapshot of some of the funding programs across the globe. So today I'll talk a little bit about the UK and Scotland, and there's been roughly $1 billion worth of funding there, but in Germany and France, there's significant investments as well. The Netherlands, the quantum flagship program. China's putting significant investments into this, and the US. So this is a sort of background to this session, I can talk a little bit about what's going on in Scotland and the UK. So the UK program, Scotland is still very much part of the UK, and we benefit from the UK Quantum Technologies program. So I've mentioned already, it's £1 billion worth of public and private investment over this 10-year time frame, so 2014 to 2024. It's split into different sections, and the funding is routed in different ways. So we have the academic hub system, funded through EPSOC, and we have an industrial strategy fund funded through Innovate UK. So the different funding agencies are down at the bottom here. In the UK, we have UK Research and Innovation, which has different funding councils within it. So I've mentioned EPSOC and Innovate UK. There's also the Science and Technology Facility Council, but there's other stakeholders in the UK. We have the Defence and Science Technology Laboratory, We have our national facilities of MPL and QMI. We have the Ministry of Defense, and we have our intelligence agency as well. So I'm sure these will come up in later discussions. The academic hub system is the way we went about it in the UK back in 2013, initiated it in 2014. So we have these 4 hubs split in the quantum technology themes. That includes computing, communication, enhanced imaging, and sensors and metrology. Now, these are led from specific universities across the UK. Quantic is led from Glasgow, Sensors is led from Birmingham, Communications York, and Computing in Oxford. However, each hub has itself roughly 15 university partners, so they produce networks of research. And some statistics here which you can look up. So there's been a lot of publications, but especially the development of skills, and the ambition from the start to focus on transfer of knowledge through to industry and support of startups. So this hub system has been very beneficial to develop these skills and support industry. But when we talk about the commercialization of any technology, it's worth mentioning this valley of death. So in the university, you can typically take the TRL so far before the funding sort of runs out and doesn't support you anymore. And in industry, it's hard to fund very low TRL technologies. So crossing this valley of death has been part of the mission built into the UK's quantum technology program, and indeed many programs across the world. So one way that we're addressing that in the UK is through the funding agency Innovate UK. It sets out to support collaboration between academic and research partner organizations with industry to help deliver products to a global market in quantum technologies. In the UK, we benefit from our Photonics sector. So it's already been mentioned today by Johannes. We have a very large Photonics sector in the UK. The size of this sector is comparable to pharmaceuticals or other big sectors in the UK. There's roughly 28,000 people employed in this sector, and it provides a large gross value added to the economy. So these are high skilled jobs which export globally. So the Quantum Technologies program has benefited from these companies and these skills and this sector. There's been some studies, and you can look this up about the organizations involved in the Quantum Technologies program. That includes more than 130 different companies across the UK. A mixture of micro, small, medium, and large companies. And as I've said already, more than 25 startups since 2014 in quantum technologies. So I'm from Scotland, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about this region here, where we have a cluster of companies, but we very much benefit from the funding landscape across the whole of the UK and work together. So in the central belt of Scotland is what we call it. So there's roughly, this is a zoom in of a map of Scotland, and we've got Glasgow on the western side and Edinburgh on the east, and it takes roughly 1 hour to drive between the two. It's getting a bit better. We have a new motorway and a faster train, so it's about 45 minutes now. So we have a large photonics sector with a turnover of more than 1 billion, so large in respect to the population size. And we have more than 60 companies working in photonics and 5,000 highly skilled jobs. And so many of these companies have seen the opportunities in quantum technologies, although they may have been photonics in background. They've very much been switched on to this opportunity in quantum technologies and have now focused efforts into products and services related to quantum technologies. One example of that is looking at how these companies engage in the wider UK quantum technologies program. So You can look up this database of the funded programs online, and of all the projects that have been funded, you can see that 50% of them have a Scottish organisation included in the consortium. And Scottish organisations are particularly prominent if you map out the funding received in this area. So very much a significant player in the UK's quantum technology programme, with roughly 10% of the population, but almost 50% of the activity. So it's quite a large stakeholder in that programme. And it's worth asking why that might be. So we also have a very strong academic sector in Scotland. That includes Glasgow University, Strathclyde, Edinburgh, St Andrews, and many more, Heriot Watt. So this is a snapshot of just one university, Strathclyde University, and what has gone on through the years in the photonics sector. But as Strathclyde point out themselves, is now a photonics and quantum sector. So back in 1982, they appointed the first chair in photonics in Scotland, and this is Professor Alistair Ferguson. And not long after that, they spun out a company called Microlays. Microlays went on to be bought over by Coherent Scotland, which now employs almost 200 people in Glasgow. And the founders of Microlays also went on to found M Squared Lasers, who is a very significant player in quantum technologies. This is a picture of Professor Martin Dawson, who founded the Institute of Photonics along with Alistair. And he's been involved in the setup of CST and CST Global, which is a Glasgow-based semiconductor company, and MLED, which went on to be sold to Oculus and Facebook. But particular of relevance to me is he also set up the Fraunhofer UK. So we have the first Fraunhofer Centre in the UK, and Martin is head of that centre. So some other things worth pointing out about Scotland and the photonics and quantum sector. So why have we been so successful at engaging in the quantum technologies program? So one thing is looking at the companies, and I've put some references at the bottom here. Typically in photonics and quantum, the companies are investing heavily in research and development. So up to 10% of revenue spent on R&D. And this is 10 to 20 times the average in Scotland. So this is a sector which invests heavily. And the staff in these companies are usually highly skilled, with 20% of them having PhDs. So that relates back to the academic sector I talked about. These companies are very happy to collaborate. So as I've pointed out, they're big players in the UK's quantum technology program, but that means they're willing to engage in collaboration. And if you do engage in open innovation, you're likely to identify new opportunities. Because many of the companies in Scotland are small and medium sized, over 75% of them are, it usually means that they're agile businesses. You're very able, it's easy to get meetings with the CTO and the CEO and initiate new opportunities. So they're very open-minded like that. So I'll talk about some of the projects which are ongoing. There's too many to mention. I think I mentioned there's more than 130 different projects across the UK. But I thought I'd highlight just a few. So I've mentioned already quantum communications, the ability to encode information on single photons, entangled photons, or using weak coherent pulse systems. And QKD has applications, for example, protecting critical infrastructure in financial services to protect your data, or transportation systems. And some programs which are going on in the UK include work from a Glasgow-based startup company called Craft Prospect, come out of perhaps a more well-known company in Glasgow called Clyde Space. And here we're looking at putting QKD systems onto cube satellites. And the reason for cube satellites is they're smaller and cheaper to launch, and you can build constellations of them. You may have heard of the organization ARKit, which has had a lot of investment lately and is looking at creating a larger satellite program, but with global coverage. And there's experts in Scotland supporting that program with development of ground station and on-satellite technologies. Another program in the UK is with BT and another startup called New Quantum based in Cambridge. And here we're looking at building-to-building QKD links and how you can protect your data, so perhaps from bank to bank or critical infrastructure. Another area I've mentioned is the quantum enhanced imaging in LiDAR. So using a single photon detector, you can get very precise time of flight, and you could also do the same with entangled photons for ghost imaging. And here we have applications in types of LiDAR, environmental monitoring and process control. And in the UK, there's a number of programs. I'm highlighting a few here. This company called Photon Force, a spin out of Edinburgh University, is working on new SPAD array technologies. Similar technologies can be deployed on vehicles for precise LiDAR systems. And there's a number of projects across the UK looking at new semiconductor technologies for this application. Quantum computing is a vast field that takes I could talk about for a long time, but basically using entanglement and superposition, we can process information in new ways. Some of the applications are broad, but range from drug development to financial services. And some programs I wanted to highlight is one led by M-squared lasers called the Discovery Program, looking at a novel type of quantum computing using cold atoms. Rigetti now have a base in the UK with their superconducting circuit system supported by the University of Edinburgh. And we're also working with the Fraunhofer network on NV centers. And on the quantum sensor side, we can trap atoms and ions and build atom interferometers. With that, we can produce new types of navigation systems. We can produce gravity gradiometers to look under the surface and map the Earth. And projects include a gravity sensor system to look under the ground with Teledyne E2V, an inertial navigation system to be put onto aircraft, and novel components such as this grating mott with Kelvin Nanotech and Strathclyde. Too many things to highlight, so I'll just throw them on the screen very quickly. I can see I'm running out of time, but some of the companies in Scotland include Unique Lasers, a small company which has now developed these advanced laser systems with a narrow line width, suitable for trapping rubidium atoms. Helio Photonics have processes to optimize the packaging and split of these dye and for laser operation at UV wavelengths. That's quite exciting. And we have Alta Technology in Scotland. So this is a large packaging company which focuses on high precision, high performance devices with a high spec clean room. So they've recently had investment to produce a photonic design center in Scotland based on the success in quantum technologies. And some of the devices they can produce are shown here. So these compact lasers, which can sit in modules here for laser stabilization. And then they can be deployed in larger sensor systems like this one here. And finally, just a word about the Fraunhofer Center. So I work at the Fraunhofer Center and lead the quantum technologies team. We have about 60 staff now based in this building, and we participate in 30% of the whole of the UK's quantum technology program. So we're involved in more than 60 projects developing high TRL demonstrators on some of the technologies that I've talked about. So thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to answering your questions and getting involved in the discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Loyd. Yeah, so if you have any questions to Loyd, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Yeah, thank you very much, Loyd, for your great insights into the ecosystem on the one side and all the projects and the Fraunhofer center on the other side. I'm really impressed of what you're doing in the UK and in Scotland because we are a little bit behind, I would say, in Germany and in other countries in the European Union. Involving users is a very important thing. You also mentioned this. What would you say? What are the main industry end users in the UK and in Scotland? So in Germany, for example, we have the automotive industry, but what would you say are the main ones in Scotland?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're very, very broad. So it's natural to find opportunities in defense and security. So we have organizations in the UK, such as Thales have a big presence in Glasgow. Leonardo have a big presence in Edinburgh. So these are easy opportunities for us to go and talk to these organizations. More broadly than that, we've talked, you mentioned automotive yourself. We do have smaller sector in that area, which has an interest in navigation systems. On the computing side, some organizations which I've mentioned have been successful reaching out to investment banks and the finance sector. Although primarily based in London in the UK, we do have presence in Edinburgh and Glasgow as well. So it's exciting that they're willing to listen to us talking about quantum technologies, even though it could be a long way away. So it's quite broad, I would say. Yeah.
That sounds great. And do you think the banks and the whole financial sector is involved well, or?
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So both in quantum computing, but also on the communication side. And also on precise timing. So distributing timing to their organizations, but looking at building-to-building links on QKD. And longer timescales computing as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sounds really great. I'm impressed. There's another question. Do you already collaborate with Berlin-based companies and institutes or institutes?
We have a lot of projects, so I'm just thinking for a second. Off the top of my head, we're not working with the industry sector in Berlin, but someone may correct me on that. We do have collaborations with the Fraunhofer HHI in Berlin, who is very active in this area as well. So they have a lot of similar capabilities, and also Fraunhofer IOF in Jena. There's a lot of overlap between what we're doing, and it may be more natural for the companies to speak to those organizations, but we're happy to collaborate and support.
Okay, yeah, that's great. But I think there is definitely a little bit for improvement. Okay, perfect. Yeah, there's no other question at the moment. So you can always put your questions in the Q&A box, and the speakers will stay here until the end, so they're able to answer the questions from the Q&A box. So thanks again, Loyd.
Thank you
for your talk, and see you at the moderated discussion later. So now we will go directly to the next speaker. Kevin, you will tell us a little bit more about your journey of quantum optics Jena and quantum technologies for secure communication, of course. The virtual stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Johannes. Welcome, everybody. And yes, Loyd, greetings from Jena. So we are talking about quantum technologies for secure communication. And I like to start with a short introduction about our company. And the company mentioned here, or the institute mentioned here, was mentioned also by Loyd. So Fraunhofer IOF. So Quantum Optics Jena is a startup of the Fraunhofer IOF. As you might know, the IOF has a long history in optical systems, and especially, or a special project mentioned the Space EPS. It was one of the first projects of the institute in the field of quantum technologies, which get quite famous. So as you can see, there is Chancellor Merkel which she has in her hands the space EPS during the Digitalgipfel, which was done last year. So we founded the company Quantum Optics Jena in roughly 1 year ago. So it was October 2020. The co-founder was Oliver de Vries, who's the CEO of Quantum Optics Jena, and myself, Ken Füchsel. I'm the CEO of the company. We are quite happy to have our first investors on board. So BMT, regional fund, ELAS Technology Investments, and the Fraunhofer Tech Transfer Fund, which is a special fund for startups from Fraunhofer. And of course, we are quite happy to have an incredible team of photonic enthusiasts and cybersecurity experts. And what we do, I will give you a short overview in a few seconds. It was mentioned by Loyd that at the moment we are at the position that we can manipulate and play around with single particles, photons, atoms, molecules, and this gives us the possibility to work in the quantum regime at the end. And there, some strange things happen. For example, superposition, entanglement. Entanglement is quite unique because this is something we often use in our development. And due to this, we are now talking about the second quantum revolution. The first one you probably know was the development of laser systems or LED, for example. And also mentioned by Loyd, there are typically 3 fields: quantum computing, quantum communication, quantum imaging, and sensing. And I will focus my talk on quantum communication. We are also involved in some projects in the quantum computing and quantum imaging field, but due to the time, I will only focus to the quantum communication. And the first question I ever asked, or every time asked, is why? Why should we think about quantum communication? What's important about this? And you can look back in history, look back and see what's going on in cryptography. And if you look back, you have to look back quite far, because Caesar ciphers, for example, and also ancient Greeks, they used some kind of cryptographic system to secure their communication. It was a quite simple way, just moving the letters 3 or 4 numbers apart, and then using this to transcript the message you want to receive. The system by itself changes a lot in the 1970s. You might heard about the Diffie-Hellman public-private key system, or RSA, for example, which is the encryption system actually is running by or often used in the internet communication. And this was the beginning, or is one of the main parts at the moment, which we are using to communicate via the internet, for example. But in the mid-90s, there were 2 guys, Peter Shor and Love Groover, who found some really nice algorithms. And the claim was there: if we had a quantum computer, then with the help of these algorithms, really nice things can be done. For example, the prime factorization, which is developed by Peter Shor. And we are now on the edge to see real applications of these algorithms in many fields. You can think about logistics, you can think about encryption systems, where actually the community published many papers that we are on the threat of the quantum computer. That, for example, a powerful quantum computer will be able to break our RSA encryption within hours at the end. And there's also, if you're interested, a nice white paper from the NIST, which was published 2 months ago, where they compare the strengthness of different algorithms for encryption with conventional computing and quantum computing. And as you can see, the quantum computer, or the security in terms of quantum computer, is quite low. So we have to think about what we do with this, because even if we don't have the power now, we can store data quite good. And if we have the quantum computer in 5 years, in 7 years, in 10 years, then for sure we can use this power to decrypt the message we actually send right now. And you can imagine there are quite some institutions which do not want to have this situation. So what can we do? you can fight quantum with quantum technologies as well. And there are two ways at the moment. So one is post-quantum cryptography, which is more or less a mathematical approach. Also, if you're interested to learn a little bit more, you can look through this two links from NIST. There's actually a call going on, or since 2016 at the end, there are some activities going on to develop new encryption algorithms, which you then use to make your encryption post-quantum secure. But it's often the case that you have the problem. You don't know what's maybe a smart mathematician has learned and has figured out to also decrypt your messages. And another way is the so-called quantum key distribution. And that's the focus of my talk in the next minutes. So what's quantum key distribution? So if you want to describe it really short, it's the generation and the tap-proof distribution of symmetric keys by the laws of quantum physics, especially of quantum optics. And what does it mean? So you can think about the communication of Alice and Bob. They want to communicate via internet, for example. And what QKD will do is introducing a quantum layer. This could be a fiber network. This could be a free space link. This also could be some kind of satellite network. And this, via this quantum layer, you will generate quantum keys, and this you will send to Alice and Bob. And Alice and Bob will use this key to encrypt and decrypt their messages. And by the fact that we are using quantum states, the whole system could be physically proved as a tap-proof at the end. Because if you measure a quantum state, you will define the quantum state, and this will you can recognize within your protocol you are running. But I will go to this later on. So there are two approaches, or there are more approaches, but the most common one will be prepared measurement systems. In this case, you have some kind of quantum random number generator, which you send to a transmission unit. This transmission unit sends the data via the quantum layer to a receiver at the other side, and this the receiver will measure the state if you want, and then generates the key at his side. We as Quantum Optics Jena, we focus on another approach. We use entangled photons. So entanglement is a quite unique property because it's very new and a quantum physical approach at the end. So we have entangled photon pair sources which generate entangled photons, and then you send this entangled photons to Alice and Bob. And since they are entangled, you will destroy the entangled state only at the measurement, or if you measure the key. And you can think about entangle them in polarization. So we measure polarization of the photons, and then generate out of this polarization zeros and ones at the end. With the help of the zeros and ones, you can create keys. And if you think about a perfect system, just to give you an impression why it's tap-proofed, if you think about a perfect system and you will measure, for example, one photon, then at the end, you will lose this photon during the transmission. And due to quantum physical principles, it's not possible to clone this kind of state and send it, just measure it, prepare it in the same exact way the entangled photon pair source created it, and then send it further. So you will see this during the running of your protocol. So after you send out your photons, you have for sure to detect them. Then there is some kind of sifting, error correction, and privacy amplification to get at the end a secret key. And this secret key, Alice and Bob will use. So to finally build a quantum key distribution system, you need at the end three main parts. So one is the photon source. The other one will be analyzer systems. And the third one, some kind of key generation, key management system, which is mostly done by software. And then you going into classical IT systems. So you use this key you generate, putting it to crypto boxes, putting it to routers, and then they use this kind of key to encrypt the messages within the networks. So since we are at the photonic days, I will focus more or less a little bit more on the ways how the photonic parts of this. So to prepare entangled photon pair sources, there are different approaches. You can think about Sagnac cavity configurations. You can think about cross crystals, double pass configuration, or Mach-Sever interferometer configurations. If you want to learn more, just I put some links to different papers where it's described what are the advantages, the disadvantages, etc. The second part will be some kind of analyzer model. We measure in 4 different bases, so horizontal, vertical, diagonal, and anti-diagonal. And for sure, you have to make sure that your polarization state is in the way it has to be, because you are at the end, if you send your data over fiber, you will see some change in the polarization. So you have to think about a polarization control. So we developed, or one part of our development was a system to control the polarization. So at the initial state, it's quite randomly what you get at the beginning. Here you can see a plot with the Bob and Alice polarization states and the different measurements in each channel. And the goal is to go into this, let's say, optimum point where you have the situation that that you create some kind of this geometry, where a specific combination will not be happen the most times. So this is done totally automatically. You will send your entangled photons, and you will adapt the polarization at the detector side to make sure that you get a nice fidelity of your system. Then the next step is the post-processing way. So counting the signals you created. So as we start our company, we create a simulation tool to really know what's happening, what's going on in the system. So as you can see, we have different configurations in terms of the photon pair source. You can think about generating millions up to gigapairs per second within the system. The fidelity is some kind of the quality of the states. Then we have the link. You can think about fiber links. You can think about satellite links. And then we have the detectors with different efficiencies. So also there is a lot of things you can buy, but to know what's happened if you change small parts, that's quite good for a startup to do not everything in an experiment. So as you run the simulation, you can get a bit stream at the end. You can get keys. For this, for example, is a 256-bit key at the end, and you can get some kind of really nice histogram. But as we know, the world is not perfect. It's not a virtual system. Here you can see some kind of measurement, whereas the detection is not quite as stable as you can see in the virtual simulation tool. So we get some kind of up and down with the bit stream, but at the end, the system is also working to create secret keys, which at the end you will use to encrypt your messages. So this key will then go to the IT system and secure the communication. But for sure, we have many advantages, but we do have some disadvantages in quantum technologies or quantum communication. And one disadvantage will be the losses due to physical laws. So if you think about quantum states, we have to think about losses into our system. And often you will read some kind of trusted node network, which is used for the transmission of data. So between Alice and Bob, if the distance is too long, we need some trusted node or quantum repeaters if they are available. But honestly, there is a lot of research going on in this field, but I'm not sure when we will have industry-ready quantum repeaters, which then can be used to repeat the signals in a way that it's not measured at the end. We see some real-world trusted node networks in the world. So there's an example from Shanghai to Beijing in China, where they created, I think it was 32 or something trusted nodes to cover this 1,000-kilometer line. And another approach will be to go to satellite networks, whereas the source, for example, so the photon source will be in the orbit and then creates the keys and send it to Alice and Bob. There are many activities right now going on with different protocols, with different approaches. There's one mission already in space, also from Chinese colleagues, which creates keys at the end. Ourselves, we have launched in April one project together with the Fraunhofer IOF and colleagues from Toptica in the development of a hybrid source with many million pairs per second, and which leads to a photon source with over 100 million pairs per second, which then is used or should be used to create QKD keys. Yeah, this as a short overview. If you want to learn more, feel free to give me a call, to write me an email. Every time looking forward to connect with other colleagues.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. I was quite surprised because many people think quantum technology is quantum computing, and the first time I talked to a bank, they said that quantum communication or quantum secure communication is the most important thing for them, because they would need 10 to 12 years to change their infrastructure to implement all these important things to have a quantum-proof infrastructure. And this is why they have to start now and not with quantum computing, because this is only a product they can sell at the later stage. So yeah, I was quite surprised by this, but yeah, I understand it. You talked about collaborations and so on. I think there is also a new call outside from the BMBF, I think announced a few days ago, to transfer developments in quantum communication to applications. Maybe this is also a collaboration opportunity for you with the participants here in our round. So if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. At the moment,
how important is authentication? That's really that's an important question. So to give you, or maybe the Photonic guys, some background. So authentication means that you want to be sure that Alice is Alice and Bob is Bob, and that if they communicate with each other, that there is no man in the middle or woman in the middle, which let's say stimulates or fakes that she is Alice or Bob. So that's the question about authentication. You're right. Authentication is something which is also important for us. So there are different approaches. You can do it, or you can think about it. There are some, let's say, protocols you can run, but at the end, we are also thinking about some kind of pre-shared key, which you only have to share once to establish the connection. And then in the follow-up, you use some kind of the keys. So let's say a different percentage to establish the communication between Alice and Bob. So you have a rolling quantum key at the end. So pre-shared key probably will be, at least at the beginning, some way to go to think about the authentication. And then in the future, we probably, or maybe we see also other solutions as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we can go directly to the next talk and talk about the questions later in the moderated discussion. Thanks again, Kevin, for your talk.
Right, thanks.
And now we will go directly to the next talk. And now it's about quantum computing and maybe what the banks can do, or what is the potential of quantum computing from the photonics perspective for all the banks and the other end user. So Jörn, you will talk about universal photonic processors for quantum information processing. And I'm very curious to hear more about your developments. So the virtual stage is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot. And also thanks a lot, Kevin, for answering my question about authentication. So yeah, let's now talk about what we are doing at QuiX, which is indeed quantum computing, which is also one of the important and maybe the most highlighted part in quantum technologies nowadays. So let me see if I can see the slides. Very good. So we believe that quantum computing will, in the future, make multiple applications possible. So there are ideas for developing new drugs and discovering new materials due to the, which is interesting also because it's due to the quantum nature of the processes, but also optimization problems are believed to be interesting, like optimizing the supply chain, and also in the finance sector, there are many interesting use cases where, like Johannes mentioned, banks are interested to look at optimization problems. So a little word, who are we? We are not from Germany, we are from the Netherlands, in the city of Enschede, close to the German border, in fact. And we are a spin-off from the University of Twente, founded in 2019, and are still also located on the site of the campus, and also share facilities, for example, for quantum experiments with the university, which is very valuable for us. The company was founded by Hans van der Fleckert and Jelmer Renema, Hans being the former CEO of a chip foundry, and Jelmer being interested in quantum computing, photonic quantum computing, and they sort of thought of making, why is there not a product? Why is no one commercializing the low loss quantum photonics that we have for quantum applications? So they built up the company, and we grew up out to 9 people, and actually we are still looking for new people. So if you're interested, write me an email and we can see what we can do for you. We're always interested in good people and always looking for good people. So our vision, how can a quantum photonic computer look like? And first, let me use some words before. It has been shown that linear optics indeed can be used for quantum information problems, and that also by a linear optical network and quantum light sources, computational hard problems can be solved. For example, in their application of quantum chemistry and machine learning by protocols such as boson sampling, Gaussian boson sampling. Yeah? So basically, in our idea, you need three things that are interesting. Input light sources, yeah. For example, like Kevin has shown, you can use fused squeeze states or single photon sources. These you inject into a multi-port interferometer, which we call a universal quantum photonic processor, and let them interfere via the Hongo-Mandel effect or quantum interference, and at the end, using single photon detectors, sample the output distribution of light. Yes, and to address multiple problems, to have it universal, it's very important that this interferometer is tunable. And what we say that, yeah, quantum light sources are commercially available. You can buy them. There are several companies around. The output, to measure the output distribution, you can buy single photon detectors. For example, Single Quantum in the Netherlands is commercializing them. But what has not been available is the quantum photonic processor to do that, to link the sources and the detectors. And that is what we've made available. And we are also happy to provide and help building full quantum photonic systems. So what do we need from the photonic processor? It needs to be large scale, because when you scale up the number of ports, or how we call it, modes, of the processor, also your computational power increases. It needs to be low loss, because every photon you lose is also loss in information. And also, it's pretty hard to generate single photons, so you basically cannot afford to use a single one of them. Yes, you want to have it programmable, because you want to address different problems and adjust your calculations. And also, your tip or the interferometer needs to preserve the coherence of the light. So quantum interference needs to be possible throughout the whole network. So large scale, what have we done? What we have now commercially available, you can buy it from us, is a 12-mode universal quantum photonic processor. In its current state, it has 66 of those unit cells. So here, Jena interferometer to change the output distribution of the light, or tune the intensity, and here a phase tuner to tune the interference of the light. There's 12 output ports, 12 input ports, and also a depth of 12 layers. And in total, this chip has 150 tunable elements. So, and what we've worked very hard on and achieved now, that this is the largest photonic processor that is available in the market. And it also, we really worked hard on getting the transmission better. And we've done so compared to our recent publication, we are now at transmission of 2.2 but 2.5 dBs, which is approximately 60% transmission, which is also the highest in the market that you can get now. By the way, operating at a wavelength of 50 nanometers. But what's more, we want a chip itself wouldn't be a product. So we want to have it at the customer side completely plug and play, so that the customer doesn't need to have extensive knowledge of integrated photonics or photonics in general. So we deliver it with our hardware and software, such that the customer at the interface simply can tune the phases and do not bother with voltages. And we take care of everything in between. And also can just simply load different programs. And from our experience, we recently deployed a system in Germany, in Paderborn. We have to say it is plug and play. You can simply deploy it there and teach people how to tune it in a few hours, and then they are good to go. So let me show you about some examples of the programmability. So what you've seen here, what you can see here is the input and the output mode, and this is simply all the light going straight through. And we always compare theory, what we expect, with the measurements, what we get, and we achieve here of these switching matrices very high fidelities, which are almost 99% most of the time. Yeah. If you want to know more about it, also have a look at our recent publication, although we've increased the understanding and the processing of the system so that these numbers are already a bit outdated. So, and also here you can see you can do arbitrary transformation. That's simply switching the matrices. What is also more important, to show the full programmability of our system, we also made we wrote QuiX with our processor, and you can also see that it's very good. that you can very well program the processor to arbitrary states as you wish. And also very high fidelities. And in the end, also it turned out that that it looks nice, but also it was incredibly hard to make for our interviews. All right. So in general, when you look at the fidelity, we also have really high fidelities, and that is also very important if you build up such quantum computing systems. That what you program is all so what you measure is also what you get, and that's only doable if you have a very high control over your software, over your system. We see that for the permutation or switching matrices of all the possible variations of the 12-mode processor, we are above 99% in average. And for the Haar random matrices, which are, for example, interesting for quantum computing applications, you see that we had almost 98% fidelity, which is incredibly high. So now let's come to the coherence preserving. So for that, we need to make indeed it's photon experiments here by a spontaneous tone conversion source and integrated into the processor. And what we wanted to know is the coherence preserved on the chip. So overall, the chip can the photons interfere with the Horngel-Mandel effect? And what we did is that we measured every single beam splitter in our network to really ensure that this is the case. And indeed, it is the case. So when you see the visibility of these dips here and here, it's the same. It has a visibility of 0.92, and this it's basically limited by the source of 0.93. And also of all these beam splitters, this is the distribution what we measured. And fortunately, there's also a bit outdated data. There should be the distribution. If we would repeat these measurements for the next chip, it will be very narrow, due to the high fidelities I showed earlier. So, but that's not all. So we are also interested in making use of our technology for different and other quantum technologies. For example, ion traps have been shown to be possible using our integrated waveguides. So here a picture of such a trap that was realized using the same technology as we do. Also, single photon generation on chip is in general possible. Maybe you want to think about dedicated chips for quantum information processing, then we are happy to supply you with the best spec that we can get. And also QKD has several applications for low loss integrated photonics. And this is all based on our basic building blocks that we have on chip. So if you're interested in that, please read our white papers or talk to me. I'm also always happy to talk about the possibilities for quantum technologies that can be done with our chips. And also how to access our technology. So as I said, we're happy to make custom-made devices and also make the full package and control for you. You can basically acquire our processor for your experiments. And we are also always interested in strategic partnerships, like develop use cases with customers and evaluation of quantum systems. So with that, I already like to thank you. And if you have questions, feel free to write me an email or to have a meeting with me. That's fine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jörn. So the first question would be, what would you say are the main technological challenges to further develop your system towards an useful processor, useful quantum computer, however you
Yes.
called it.
So the question is, what would be useful? Yeah, it's always debatable. But yes, it's in quantum computing, I think it's all about scalability. So how much can you scale up your processor, and in our case, also the system? So how many photons can you get that can still interfere on a chip to be useful? Yes, and the other thing is losses. Scalability in quantum photonics goes with losses. So we try to push that further down, and also in the next iterations with larger processors, because I said that larger processors have more computing power. We also have lower losses.
I would say it's only a matter of time to have a larger processor.
Yeah, it's important to work with a mature technology, I would say, in order to be scalable.
Yeah, thanks. So there is another question. How does your approach? How does your approach to quantum computing compare with Psi-quantum and Xanadu?
I think Psi-quantum has a different approach, because they're measurement based and always measure with photodiodes. Let's see what comes out there. They promised 1 million qubits. I'm very curious how. And then also it's about the quality of the qubits, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And for Xanadu, they also proposed similar schemes using Gaussian boson sampling. So I would say this is a similar approach with our processor there compared to their publications having the higher specs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is a question from Toll. What are the requirements on timing of all modulators as you scale up to Photonics processors?
We don't have modulators as such. So what we use are typically thermo-optic phase shifters, which are slow. That's true, but since for these sampling experiments that we have in mind currently, you have very long integration times anyhow. So we have a reconfiguration time of the processor of about 1 second, and the integration time of the measurements is longer. So that's not a problem, but I'm happy to discuss that also one-on-one if I haven't answered the question correctly.
Yeah. Okay. Please feel free to reach out to Jörn, and if you have no contact details, I'm also happy to make the introduction. Yeah. Then thanks again, Jörn, for your talk, and now we will go directly back to the ecosystem part. So I'm happy to welcome Toll Davids, who will tell us more about building a quantum ecosystem and national initiative in Israel. So looking very much forward to your talk, Toll.
All right, cool. Can you hear me and you see my slides?
We can hear you and we can see your screen, but not in presentation mode.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Cool. Okay, so thank you, Johannes, for inviting me and for setting up this session. And I think it's already bringing fruits, because behind the scenes, we're already talking about and making links between people. So I think that one of the goals here has already been achieved, and that's excellent. And I also want to thank Loyd, that saved me quite a few slides of introduction in his presentation. In some parts, I was feeling he was talking from my mouth and saying very similar stuff. So I will try to focus in this talk about how we actually built the Israel ecosystem and what kind of mechanisms we have to bring people together to do this work. And if I have some time, I'll say a few words about the industries that we have in Israel. So when we started out, we were at a very, infancy point in Israel. Israel is a small country. We don't have a lot of resources. And we made a lot of work to understand what we have and what we need to focus on. So at the beginning, we noticed that we had quite good scientific excellence in academia. And the quantum community in Israel is also quite young. but it's a small community. We had about 3 years ago, we had about 100 research groups all across Israel, and that's it at the core of quantum technology. I'm not talking about, adjacent or interfacing fields like photonics, but really at the center of the core of quantum technology and science in Israel. In industry, it was even smaller. We just had 3 or 4 companies, mostly the defense companies in Israel. We just had, at that time, only one of the startups in quantum computing that was formed, Quantum Machines, and has grown significantly since then. So we didn't have a lot of industry. And in the government, except for the Ministry of Defense portfolio, there was no dedicated R&D portfolio in quantum science and technology in Israel. So the starting point was very small and modest. And then we analyzed the situation, and we got to a few conclusions and understanding of what we need to do. So this whole thing is under what is known in Israel as the TELEM Forum. TELEM is the Hebrew acronym for Technological Infrastructure for Research. And this is a joint venture for the Council of Higher Education, the Innovation Authority, and the Ministries of Science, Technology, Defense, and Finance, of course, or the most important people giving the money for all of this. So this forum is not new. It's for over 20 years now, and it's typically joining forces for physical infrastructure projects. And I give a few examples here. And here in our case, in the Quantum Initiative, it was the first time that we took a more holistic view and not focused only on physical infrastructure, but also on other aspects, as I'll show in a couple of minutes. So among the main conclusions and the challenges that we identified, we understood, first of all, that quantum science and technology is here to stay. It's not a fashion, and it's a strategic field. And Israel, that has a long-standing heritage of information communication technology and cyber and AI, needs to position itself as a leader. On the other hand, we're still in infancy, and we need to look at it as a long-term vision. Another thing is that this is a change of paradigm. Building a quantum computer is not taking a few CPUs and GPUs and bunching them up together. It's something completely different. And with this understanding, we understand that we need to develop the ecosystem accordingly in a widespread approach to bring people together from different disciplines, to enhance disciplines, to create quantum engineering disciplines that were not available until now, and so on. The main challenge that we saw in Israel is human capital, not in the sense of excellence, but in the sense of the size. We don't have enough people working in this field. And so the main challenge is to enlarge and improve the community while maintaining the scientific and technological level of excellence. This is a main issue, and we attack this challenge through various components of the program. Of course, there's the issue of what to focus on, to invest in everything on the one hand, but to give a focus on things that we are strong. On the other hand, I'll say a few words about this in a minute. A very important thing is international collaboration, and I think this is also something that we'll discuss in the panel after my talk here. On the one hand, we understand that this technology, which is deep and complicated, you cannot really do it and get to a leading point in the world without collaborating with friends. And this is true in all levels, in academia and industry, and also in the defense establishment, like Loyd said at the beginning. On the other hand, we see that the window of opportunity gets smaller and smaller all of the time. We see this in processes from the US, in processes in China, and also in the European Union. And I guess that we'll talk a little bit about that also in the panel. Finally, the issue of management and what kind of structure we have. We wanted to get the most of the money to the people that are actually doing the work. So we have a very flexible, fast, lean management structure. Less than 1% of the budget of the whole program goes to management. And this is something that is, I think it's important and quite uncommon. So from these understandings, we defined 3 high-level goals. 2 of them are quite trivial. One is to push academia and enhance it. The second one is to form the ecosystem for applied research. Third one is maybe less trivial, and that is that this program does not aim to be an R&D hobby. It is aiming really to implement quantum science and technology in business and also in defense. and really get to the impact, to have the economic impact, to create jobs and so on and so forth. The rationale of the program is that everything is competitive, everything is based on scientific and technological excellence. It's very important for us to be open to all relevant parties, both within Israel and also for international collaborations. For example, in quantum computing, we had an RFI for one of the main projects that I'll describe in a minute. And we opened it for international collaboration and got quite a few responses for that. And we liked that a lot. And I think the other things were covered already. So this is a snapshot of the components of the initiative. The overall scope is about $360, $380 million. The dollar rate keeps dropping now. And the size of the circles is relatively proportional to the budget size out of that, and we go up to the year 2025. I'll give a few examples for these components. So first thing that we did was we formed a basic academic research fund, which brings together groups of researchers from different departments of different universities to work together. We have already 2 rounds active in that. And already from this research fund, we see an increase of about 25% in the number of research groups, the core of quantum science and technology in Israel, in just a year and a half or 2 years that this is active. Okay, so this is something that is creating the basis that everything builds upon. Also, this fund is open for collaborations from people abroad under some conditions. The second example is industry consortia. I think one of the things that, talking to a lot of people from other national initiatives around the world, things that is, one thing that may be unique in Israel is that because we are so small, the R&D cycles are short. And this is an example. We take a few industries from the core of quantum technology. We take a few industries that are future clients of this technology, and we bring support from 10 or 12 academic groups who are all working together on the generic technology development. In this case of quantum sensing, working on atomic clocks, on quantum magnetometers, on quantum gravity sensors, and on multi-sensor networks for timing, for example. Everybody working together, although in principle they are competing with each other, but we make it work. And this drives them forward in a very nice way. So this is one example in quantum sensing. We also have a similar consortium that we initiated earlier at the beginning of this year in QKD, in quantum cryptography, that is oriented around the same rationale or idea. The third example that I wanted to share is quantum computing. Here, we cannot say that, or let's say, if the Israeli community is small, the Israeli quantum community is even smaller, or it was smaller at the time that we initiated the initiative. So we needed to give a special focus on that. We do that both from going to state-of-the-art quantum computing over the cloud, what we call cloud time. We do that in a special investment in academia on top of everything that I described before, to generate more people into the education and training pipeline and so on. And the main project that we have and that we're still defining in these weeks and months is what we call applied quantum computing. And in simple words, it is to build the Israeli quantum computer, and in more precise terms, it is to build a physical infrastructure at the full stack from the qubit level to the software and algorithm levels and everything in between, that the whole ecosystem in Israel would be able to build upon. So if I have a startup that is developing quantum algorithms, that I will not need to go far away, and I have something that I will have a complete access to the hardware, and I will not need to develop it by myself. This is the idea of this infrastructure, and we hope to initiate that in 2022. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that it's nice that we in the government have this ambitious programs, but without people working on the ground and actually connecting with each other, nothing will help, nothing will succeed. And so we have grassroots community programs that are people that are getting organized by themselves, and they are complementing what we in the government are doing. So we have the qubit community that are making wonderful events. Most of them are open. really going into the depth of the technology and the science of this. We have special programs for future scientists, both young people in Israel. There's a compulsory military service that we use these people and put them in research to the benefit of the whole system. And we go also to future scientists, people that are making their academic degrees while they are in high school and orienting them into quantum technology. So these are kind of special elite scientist programs that will generate the future workforce. And I think this is also something quite unique. So I started by saying that we didn't have almost any industry. Right now, we're counting about 30 companies of all sorts and sizes. Some of them are big companies, like, for example, Mellanox, that was acquired by NVIDIA about a year ago, or the defense companies in Israel. Some of them are medium companies, and of course, startups. Not all of the startups appear here on the board because some of them are still in stealth mode. Also, there are a mixture between hardware, software, and component manufacturers. So just as an example, Raycor is an electro-optics crystal company that is active for many years. In the last few years, they've seen demand, and actually they are creating a whole new vectors of crystals for quantum technology. They're working on quantum imaging, for example, with Fraunhofer in Germany. They're working in QKD and also working in quantum computing. In the Chinese quantum supremacy experiment that was about a year and a half ago, all of the crystals there were made in Israel by these companies, just as an example. Already now, while we're talking about, I also can mention maybe QuantLR, which is a QKD company that I think maybe we can have a nice connection to what we just heard in that field here. And also, for lack of time, I won't go into all of them. So to summarize, we feel that quantum science and technology is a paradigm-changing field. Connecting to what Johannes said at the beginning, it's not only quantum computing at all. The more mature fields technologically is quantum sensing and crypto. We feel that the Israeli community, Israeli industry, is at the state of the art in the world and competes with the markets. We are very happy to have any connections and partnerships. And Israel's quantum sensing technology is booming, both in the government investments and also by the growth of industry players. So I think that I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tal. I'm so impressed by your fast-growing ecosystem in such a short time. It's really great to see this approach, the agile and lean approach. And that's great. We would need such a thing here in Germany or Europe, I would say. Yeah, so if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I would say we go directly to the panel. So it seems that there are no questions at the moment. Yeah, then thanks again, Tal, for your talk. And we will have a few questions now in the panel. So I would like to start to talk a little bit about quantum ecosystems with all of you. And yeah, let's take a look into the crystal ball and discuss how we can accelerate the transformation process I mentioned in the beginning, from the community to a strong industry. Loyd, the UK and yeah, also the Netherlands, but mainly the UK, were the first promoting entrepreneurship and quantum technologies in general. So if you look at the current roadmaps of France and Germany, do you smile, lay back and think, now they are doing what we did a long time ago, we are years ahead, or what are your thoughts?
Thanks, Johannes. Yeah. Learn from our mistakes. Yeah, no, it's good. We were lucky in the UK. We had some excellent spokespeople for quantum technologies. So one is Peter Knight. So Peter Knight, you might know him. He gives an excellent presentation. I advise you to look him up if you haven't seen a talk. So he very much focused on the commercialization of quantum technologies. And entrepreneurship and looking at ways to not just develop a science program, but support industry. So I'm very happy to see that many other programs around the world have taken that similar philosophy. And if you look at countries around the world, like Germany and France, you mentioned, have world-leading research centers, but also engineering skills. So I expect in many ways that you will leapfrog some of the ambitions that we had in the UK. You do see some duplications on small projects, but that's natural when you have industry involved. So there's some competition there about who could build the best quantum computer or the best QKD system. So no, I think it's great that these programs have started. It's excellent opportunity to collaborate and build on skill sets across Europe and across the globe. So it's very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. For me, it's definitely all about the European ecosystem. So I don't distinguish between the different countries. Paul, what's your view of the European ecosystem? So we have good researchers, good entrepreneurs, maybe a lack of mindset in entrepreneurial mindset in the broad public. Yeah, what would you say if you look from outside to Europe? What are the weaknesses or strengths of our ecosystem here?
Yeah, okay, so I don't think that I'm really from the outside, especially now, not compared to the UK. But I think that the European community has a very strong foundation in research. It has evolving industry, but it's moving not as fast as one would like. I think there maybe two things or three things to focus on is, first of all, how to do tech transfer, how to bridge this valley of death that Loyd was talking about. I think the UK program has done that marvelously. We try to do that also. For us, it's easy because it's a small country, so everything's quick here. And also implementing things in the field in Israel is quite easy. The second thing I think is to reduce the level of complexity and bureaucracy of processes, which is something that Europe is very good at not doing. And the third thing, I think that's the most important thing, is the networking. As I said earlier, it's all good and nice that we in the government will have nice programs and call for proposals and tenders and so on. But the first thing that people need is to get to know each other, okay, to work together and to connect. And so events like this, or the QBN or the QCN under the flagship, all of these are, I think, essential in order to push people to get to work together. It's very complicated because everybody is busy and we have a lot of people around us and so on and so forth. But I think this is essential. And this relates also to the comment that I made before about the window of opportunity for collaboration. We quantum physicists were maybe a little bit too successful in persuading the governments that quantum is strategic and so on. And now, instead of people working together, you see barriers coming up. And I think this is very bad. I think this is something that we need to fight together from the scientific and technological community in order to make things possible for collaboration. Because I think already now we see that people who do not collaborate end up being outside the fence and they lose opportunities. And this is true in quantum, and it's true also in other areas as well. And this goes up to the highest levels. And I think that if the community from the ground up will sound its voice about this issue, this is something that is crucial to the faster advancement of business here.
Yeah, I totally agree. You speak from my heart. Yeah, I think we have a lot to do for the quantum technology ecosystem and industry, definitely. So Photonics has also, or has already a well-established ecosystem and industry with trade fairs and standards. Jörn, where quantum people are dreaming of? Would you say, from a photonics perspective, is quantum just another application domain for you? And what about the combined ecosystem from your point of view?
Yes, I mean, yes. Basically, for photonics, photonics was always an enabling technology, isn't it? So yes, photonics was always a tool, and it's very, very versatile. Huh? For example, for quantum optics Jena, I believe they would need to work at 1550 a lot, huh? If they're not talking about satellite communication, but to work on common infrastructure. Huh? And on the other hand, yes, I think photonics also has, at least if I think about integrated photonics, where our specialty is, you also need to think that there, the photonics industry also has adapted a bit, because there for some applications like ion traps or atomic clocks, you don't have an infrastructure yet. So there are no optimized integrated circuits, for example, that all has to be developed. And there's the hope that quantum will deliver a market such that it's worth it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jörn. Yeah, from a startup perspective, given the European Commission and national governments are currently investing in a substantial amount of money in quantum technologies development and adoption, do the measures fit to your needs as a startup?
Good question, Johannes. I would say it fits quite well, and often too well, because we have a 100% funding rate. So each proposal we just put into, we actually get, and it's
don't say this too loud.
Yeah, it's
if you have too much, we can help you.
It's really good to have this situation, but at the end, at least in German, there is the situation that you will not get 100% funding. So you need to have some kind of co-funding from your investors at the end. And this has to be balanced, because if you do too much R&D, you will lose the focus on your product, because at the end, the BNBF in Germany, it's not a development of products, it's research which is funded, not development of products. So you have to do this aside. So I think there is a need for also some kind of projects which help startups to develop products. I'm not sure how to make this in a way that it's in a bureaucracy working. So that's for sure a discussable point. But yeah, that's I think the ecosystem in this way is quite good at the moment. So we have a lot of funding opportunities in different fields, in quantum imaging, in quantum computing, in quantum communication. A lot of proposals can be sent into, so there will be ways to get it done. I like to point out, because we read about the Valley of Death, or heard about the Valley of Death. I think in Europe, maybe the Valley of Death is not the problem. Maybe the next round is the problem, because if you think about Series B, C, D funding, then we have often the case that European investors do not take this. So they are more involved in the seed funding or Series A. So I think that's not an issue to really get funding from investors to run or start a company. But if you want to be fast, if you want to grow at a certain rate, then probably lately in the Series C, you have to think about other opportunities. And maybe this is or could be a message to other parties that we need some kind of bigger funds who can invest in later rounds.
There I can say will be a good news from Munich in the next month. So can't say more, but
looking forward to.
There will be some surprises. I heard about this.
Yeah, well, but the value of death, like Loyd presented it, is not at the initial stages. It is between research and commercialization. Okay, and commercialization it depends really on what you're building, but it does not happen usually at seed or Series A. It comes much later. So I don't think that actually there is a contradiction between what you said.
Okay, it's probably the definition of value of death. So from my perspective, we often had the discussion to really go to a TRL 8 or 9, so which is then a system which is already in the field. So from our perspective, we will see this with quantum optics Jena quite soon. But it does not take that we are, let's say, building thousands of them in a really commercialized way, and it's not a consumer good at the end. But in most time, I would agree that the first or the beginning of the valley of death, you will totally find a way to do this with the funding schemes we actually have. If you really want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to run your company, I think at the beginning, the money is not a problem to run the company, at least from our experience.
Yeah, as I said before, if you have too much money, we can help you with that.
No, it's not too much money. It's at the moment, it's quite the ideal way.
Yeah, and I think that's also a good starting point for collaboration, a comfortable one. Okay, Loyd, what would you say if it comes to collaboration and projects? How does Brexit impact this topic or this thing for you? How does Scotland handle sovereignty in quantum?
Yeah, the dreaded Brexit question I will have to answer for the for the rest of the near future. Yeah, so Scotland is still currently a part of the UK, so I have to talk about it in that context. Everybody who I've spoken to in academic and in research and the research arm of industry did not want Brexit, and they want opportunities to collaborate across Europe. So it puts a lot of risks and strain on those relationships. So I hope that we can continue to be part of Horizon 2020 and Horizon future funding in quantum technologies. That's not entirely clear at the moment. So that's a great risk to us, and we would want to be part of that. Another challenge is the flow of skills. People used to be able to freely move, so it's just that little bit harder. So we need everybody to complete visa applications, which is not nice. And I think we might talk about this in more detail, is the link between quantum technologies and the defense and security applications. So this is one reason why countries are putting up barriers, and it can cause difficulties collaborating with certain US companies because of the ITAR restrictions. Every country wants its own capability, its own quantum computer access, and is QKD linked also to security? So it does cause headaches and complications when we talk about the commercialization. But I would very much encourage and welcome the opportunity to get past that and collaborate, especially at concept level, component level, different schemes that we can pursue. So I think collaboration, as was pointed out by a few people, is key to progress the field. So I hope it doesn't cause too many problems. I look forward to collaborating across Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, in Germany we have a saying, where will is also a way. So hopefully we will find this way to collaborate in the future. Hopefully even more. Kevin, if it comes to sovereignty issues in quantum communication, does that lead to another business development or funding strategy for you, or do you feel something like this?
Actually,
it's no topic for you.
No, we see the opportunity to run a company in Europe, especially in quantum communication, because as you might hear, we have this European quantum communication infrastructure, which should be established till 2027. And there is one really nice phrase in the press release that this will be done by European players. So at the moment, we do not have too many players. So there will be opportunities for startups to participate if they have a product on the market. That's for sure the way we have to go to be able to deliver at the end.
Jörn, what about the quantum computing domain? So we heard a lot about restricting investments and sales, and does that change anything for your strategy to deal with other countries?
Yes, I would say so. Yes, I mean, we basically want to do business with everyone, isn't it? We are supply right now parts of a photonic quantum computer, and this one we would we would like to share with as many people as possible, of course. I think for Kevin, sales also sales in, for example, China. So especially for QKD, I think is more critical. For us, less, because right now we only deliver a part of a quantum computing system. That's I think not yet restricted, but it's let's say I can see that it will be restricted in the future. And the other thing is that we also now keep an eye quite well already on, can we find all the parts that we need within Europe? Because this is also a question you get asked. Yeah. So is the critical infrastructure present in Europe? Luckily, right now for us, it is, yes.
Do you see gaps for other domains?
I'm not too sure. I don't know. It could be chips, even as simple as that, electronic chips.
Yeah, of course, the chips. Yeah, that's right. Paul, how does Israel handle the sovereignty issues? So competitive versus collaboration. How can we work together globally?
I think we should work together globally. I think this is it needs to have a balance. On the one hand, the consideration for independence and so on are very understandable and clear. On the other hand, there is only so much that you can do to control or restrict or monitor activity without, suffocating it. So we need to manage this in a smart way. In Israel, we have laws and regulations for R&D and investments and foreign investment disclosure and so on for many years. It's not special just for quantum. It's here for all R&D. So we know how to protect and maintain the IP very nicely. On the other hand, it's very important for us to push the startup companies and industry in general to go and grow and compete with the world and get big. There is a tension about whether an Israeli company will be eaten by some giant. So the Israeli laws require that if you want to keep maintaining governmental money, you need to have, even in such cases, that the Israeli company will stay in Israel and will write all the IP from Israel and commercialize from Israel, and it works for many years very nicely. So we're quite confident about that. I know that also in the UK you have similar mechanisms in some other countries, but not in all of the countries in Europe. And I think this is something that is common to all countries, this tension between these two things here. At the end of the day, you need to understand, certainly in such complicated areas, that you need to let the industries grow and let them do the work and not limit them unless it's really, really necessary. Especially, for example, in quantum computing right now, where we're quite far from, the breakthrough in terms of commercialization of real practical uses. It's not yet the time to limit it. It's the time to learn from other people. So we're quite optimistic that this thing could be managed. And from our point of view, we do everything we can to make it work. So if there is a company that wants to work in Israel with a company that wants to work in Europe, we will do everything that we can to make it work. Okay, I think that's the message.
much. So we heard a lot about the importance of commercializations, and let's talk about a little bit about the challenge there. So Kevin, the biggest challenge for you as a deep tech startup to address the emerging market of quantum communication and also for quantum imaging, what would you say? What are your main challenge, the biggest challenge? You are muted.
Just recognize it. So as we come from Fraunhofer, we are still very close to industry, but as I have to say now, only very close. So the last step for a commercial product has also been done. So if you want to bring a product to market, you have to think about 24/7. Install a system without a PhD. So that's the questions we are now raising to make it user friendly, to establish it in a way that it really runs automatically without any experience in physics or quantum mechanics. That's the main challenge at the moment. And then for sure we have some challenges in the future. But this, I will guess, will go too far. We can think about new fiber designs. We can think about photonic integrated circuits for sure. We can think about multiplexing geometries, network geometries. All this will play a role. But at the moment, for us, the driver is really get a product running for an end user, which uses or where photonics enables cybersecurity at the end. So we see ourselves between the middle. So we are a cybersecurity company, but also a photonics company, where we use photonics as an enabler for a new level of security.
What would you
If
say?
I may add here?
Yeah. So.
I think that what Kevin says is right on the point. On the mark. Quantum science and technology traditionally was a business of physicists mostly, maybe a little bit computer scientists. And the two challenges that are needed now are engineering and business development. We have to develop both of them. Although everybody says there's a great promise to quantum science and technology, you still need to do the work of business development to develop this market. This is something that people coming from technology don't always think about. And as Kevin said, the CEO of a startup, I think most of what he thinks about is the business development, less the technology, actually. I think that's very, very important. And also, I think that this also relates to one of the earlier questions before about the interface from photonics. I think that one of the main advantages of the photonics industry, which is huge and very well established, is the engineering force. And I think that if the quantum community will join forces with the photonic community together, this could be an important step to advance both the engineering and the business development challenges.
Yeah, and of course we have to convince the NSA, for example, or other organizations from, for example, in the UK, that QKD is very important. What is your answer, Kevin, to this announcement of the NSA that they wouldn't recommend now the QKD devices?
So I think they write in the proposal, or in the not the proposal, in the this message that there are no let's say 24/7 products on the market, so it's not a mature technology. You can believe this. For sure, we will work on this. But on the other hand, I also get some kind of understanding why the NSA would not propose QKD in a broad field, because with this technology, there will also be some, let's say, challenges for some institutions to do their job at the end. So,
and I think standardization is also a very important step to convince these organizations.
Yeah. But to be honest, there is some really nice standards actually also in QKD on available. So there are some ETSI QKD standards right out, and so you can use some kind of server configurations, etc. So it's all there at the end. So from our perspective, I think it's not far away to really bring QKD to IT systems on let's say, not only point-to-point connections, but also to real networks or infrastructures.
Yeah, looking really much forward to these installations. So Jörn, the global race in quantum computing is on, and yeah, starts heating up, I would say, not only between countries and companies, but also between different platforms. And yeah, photonic quantum computers are not very common. How do you deal with this superior strength of the global players like IBM and their famous picture in the press?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, it's very exciting, isn't it? So basically, you had back then superconducting qubits and ion trap qubits, and photonics was always a bit of the dark horse. And now getting with these big overseas companies that were already mentioned, more and more attention. So that's very exciting. But yes, I think I still have to say that, yeah, photonic quantum computing has been the second platform where quantum has been claimed. So there is the potential. The question is, can you make use of that potential? And that's very exciting. And on the big players like IBM, Google, yes, of course, they're there, but also you have to see the positive side. They also attract much attention to the field, which wouldn't otherwise, I think, not be possible. Which also helps funding other approaches like the photonic quantum computing.
Should yeah, do a little bit more the American approach and make a little bit more marketing for the photonic quantum computing systems, or do we should stay with the German approach and wait until everything works fine?
Yes, I think I heard that somewhere, that the German approach is always making picks and shovels to enable other people. And that also, I think, it also connects to what Kevin said about the big funding, the really serious funding that's less common here in Europe. So yes,
I think that's
so. Yes, we should make more advertise. Yes, and be also yes. Go ahead.
The photonics qubits have a challenge in marketing because, in contrary to gate-based atomic or superconducting circuits models, the entry ticket in photonic qubits is more expensive. It takes a little bit more time and effort in order to show that you have something working in that platform relative to the other platforms, and therefore it's a little bit more complicated to sell it also. And that's why you see companies like Xanadu or PsiQuantum, they're working without much noise. But on the other hand, the potential for scale up, as was said before, is huge. So maybe they will just pass everyone else, because the scale up challenges for superconducting circuits or for trapped ions, if you think about these huge cryo fridges with all of the inputs and outputs in there, huge engineering challenge there. So maybe they're modest in the photonic qubits industry, but they have tremendous potential there.
Yeah, right. It's about who builds the biggest fridge, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, Tol, you addressed this topic, the commercialization, also in the talk a little bit. And you told me in one of our meetings that at the beginning there were only 4 to 5 companies in quantum technology in Israel, and now you have up to more than 30 companies, which is a huge success. So what do you think are the main drivers of the commercialization in Israel? And if you look at European-Israel collaboration opportunities, what would you say are the most important ones or the best ones?
Mm-hmm. So in Israel specifically, one of the big drivers is, and always has been, defense. You have a need, it's really here and it's immediate. If we develop atomic clocks that go to the active missile defense to protect my house when it's being shot at, it's a good driver. And defense in generally has always been a driver for technological development, I think, worldwide. But more to the point here, I think it's a combination of three things. One of them is maybe more unique to Israel and also maybe to Scotland. And the other ones are more general. The unique one is to have small cycles, a small community. Everything is in 1 hour's drive away. This is a tremendous help. So concentrate the effort on the geographic. Although we're in a global world, this concentration, I think, is important. Everybody knows everyone, so the cycles are short. Secondly, I think there's a combination between the government activities and private venture capital, okay? Venture capital will not go to invest without seeing that the local ecosystem driven by government is not active, okay? So we've heard a few years ago from multinational companies, if you do something in the government, we will come. Not necessarily to get money from the government, but they need to see the activity there in order for them to come. And in the last 2-3 years since we have started, we have seen venture capital's investment in startups. We have seen also more mature investments. This is also connecting to what Kevin pointed out before, in the more mature companies that are shifting their attentions into quantum. Okay, and then they're dealing with bigger money. So the three things are short cycles, venture capital, and government all working together.
Yeah, that's definitely right. Totally agree with that. In the UK, Loyd started betting on quantum technologies already in 2013, I think, with the first wave of investments. And 8 years after that program started, what has commercially grown out of these investments? We saw a little bit all these projects and the hubs and so on. And what are the next steps for the UK and Scotland in particular?
Yes, thanks, Johannes. What was so 2013 is quite a while ago now. So you can see the investment in this area paying back in the development of skills. So we now have a lot of skilled and qualified people in this topic. Many of them have left the UK, but that's fine. They go on to grow the area sort of worldwide. Is also the change in mindset. It's not just academic research, but the researchers working on this topic are thinking about commercialization. They're either starting spin-out companies or they're working with industry. They're developing demonstrators that work outside in the rain in Scotland and building-to-building links. So it's that change in attitude. I think we've hugely benefited from. In terms of pointing at specific commercial outputs, it's still a bit hard, I would say, and nebulous. There's lots of different things going on in small amounts in different ways. So there's a lot of startup companies with grand ambitions. Some of the sensor technologies have been deployed, but I couldn't give you sort of return on investment figures on them. But I would reiterate what everybody has said is there's still a lot more to do on the engineering side of things. So some of these, for example, if I take a cold atom-based sensor system, it may have the requirements of 20 different laser frequencies to be running simultaneously. And when you see the demonstrators, even after sort of 7-8 years, you know, they're still very complex. A lot more engineering needs to go into these systems to get the maximum return on investment. So similar for some of the clocks, some of the cold atom clocks. Okay, they need a few less lasers, but they need to operate 24/7 for tens of years. You know, they need to be placed in extreme environments onto planes or ships and not have elements break. So there's a lot more to be done on the engineering side. So that's something that we'll all be working on, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. Yeah, we are already at the end of our session here, and I just want to ask you for your closing statements. If you look into the crystal ball, how does the quantum industry look like in 4 years, and what is the key to get there? Maybe in 1 or 2 sentences. Kevin, would you like to start with this?
Yeah, I think I can encourage everybody to work in quantum technologies because from our perspective, this will be a future field for sure. Maybe not as fast as we think, but at the long term, it will be more, we will have more impact. That's my vision for the future ball, if you like. Yeah.
Okay.
I missed the second question. What was the second question?
What is the key to get there?
Okay. Yeah, I think collaboration will be some key element. Yeah, for sure, engineering or combining sciences, engineering, quantum tech or quantum physics, but also information technology for our perspective.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Jörn, what would you say does the quantum industry look like in 5 years? And what is the key to get there?
Yeah, I always think that predicting something like that is not, you cannot be serious, so let's not be serious. But my hope is that we see growing commercial and markets for quantum technology. That would be lovely. And yes, I think that one of the keys is indeed what we call quantum engineering. So to combine these two parts.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Loyd, what do you think?
Yeah, it's such an exciting and rapidly changing field. I would expect to see sensors deployed, clocks deployed, QKD systems more widespread on quantum computing, solving interesting problems, not just demonstrations, but solving things which couldn't be done before. And yet to get there, more of what we've just heard: collaboration, taking advantage of skills of engineering and science across different organizations and countries.
Yeah, thank you. Tol, what is your vision for the quantum industry in 5 years?
Well, I hope that two things will happen. One is that we will move from business development to sales. And the second thing is that we will move from a quantum industry into the more mainstream industry. So more, general purpose technological organizations will incorporate quantum technology more naturally into them. This is just beginning right now. And the way to get there is people, to get the good people to talk to each other, to work with each other. That's the key.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the session with such inspiring thoughts as much as I did. And thank you very much to our brilliant speakers here, to Tol, Jörn, Kevin, and Loyd. Finally, I would say make sure you follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and subscribe to our QEN YouTube channel if you want to learn more about quantum technologies. And if you need any connections to the speakers or other actors in the ecosystem, don't hesitate to contact us. And yeah, I wish you a great day and further exciting sessions here at the Photonics Days. Thank you very much for joining, and yeah, see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.